last week, and I'll do a small recap on last week. Jeff and I sat here and we talked to you about purple teaming, kind of a crash course. We kind of had a little joke where we were trying to figure out, like, if we could teach Jeff, a sales guy, about purple teaming. And I think we came to the conclusion that we were pretty successful in doing that. As a follow-up to that purple team conversation, Jeff had a really good point, like he always does, in terms of, taking a look at bad reporting versus good reporting, which, I have no problem bashing other people's terrible work. I've seen enough of it in this industry. I think I actually tried to look for Jeff. I think I've shared
You're
this
usually
with you.
so reserved about that.
I'm so reserved.
I have to pull it out of you. What do you tell me? Just close your eyes. Tell me what you really think.
Close your eyes. I haven't heard that one from you ever. Close your eyes, Neil. Channel your inner.
Imagine if you will.
Talk to us about that report that just gets you.
It's like I don't even get the second syllable of the word report out, and you're like, I got a few things to say.
Hold on, let's go to the report. So I did go through, Jeff, and I did find some reports. I did spend a lot of time redacting one report that I found that was pretty egregious. So we are going to go through a bad pen test report. Jeff, I can't wait.
You could have pulled any off the shelf and said, "This is a bad one. Hey, this is a bad one too."
It's funny you say that, right? Because as I'm looking through, I got a drive over here full of pen test reports, and I'm looking through that, and I'm like, oh boy, which report do I want to pull off the shelf to talk about tonight?
How many of them were written by you?
None.
Okay.
None. I think before we get started, we do have a priority question that Dev Zen would like to get across. When do the I&E internships start? I in full transparency, and again, I have no problem answering. When we talk about questions, one of the things that I do share with the community, Jeff, is I am the only chief content officer for any training company out there that makes myself the most accessible to the entire community. And so I do welcome questions on I&E if that is something of interest to folks. I will say, I know you asked this as a joke, Dev, with the smiley face at the end there. I did talk to HR. We are in the process of formalizing an internship program, because there is a lot that goes in on that, and I'm assisting in that process to drive an internship program so that we can actually provide an internship program at I&E. So I'll give you the Blizzard World of Warcraft answer and say soon. It is happening soon.
Cool.
When's Carbon Black going to do some internships? See how I pivot there?
We have them, and I have zero control over them.
I was just about to put you on the spot and be like, so we're giving away an I&E or a Carbon Black internship tonight.
Not a chance. I have like negative control over that. Like, stay in your lane, Jeff. Okay.
Sales guy, no.
Yeah, exactly. See, this is what happens when we put a sales guy in charge.
in
That's
charge.
Exactly what would happen. Exactly. We are never actually in charge. We just think we are.
Yeah. So for tonight, Jeff, yes, we are going to take a deep dive into two topics tonight. I do want to talk about threat emulation. And I know that's kind of a general term, but I had to find two words that made for a really nice intro. We will dive into what that is, but I do want to talk to you about threat emulation a little bit. And I also want to talk about the differences between red teaming and purple team reporting. So both of those are definitely things that we are going to talk about tonight.
Is there such a thing as a blue team report? Like, would there ever be a need for a blue team report?
When you think about blue team reporting,
like process, procedure kind of stuff. Well,
mostly we're talking about things like incident response reports, forensics reports.
Oh, okay. I guess that would fall into that.
Yeah. I would say that but the concepts. Here's what I would say though: the concepts that we talk about on reporting, I would argue, are applicable across everything, right? Whether we're talking about red team reporting, purple team reporting, blue team reporting, right? GRC reporting, I would still argue that the things that you and I talk about from a reporting perspective are actually insanely valuable. That's what
I would think, and this would totally change the industry. But I mean, you've got like a red team company coming in, and I kind of want to frame this out because this is a little bit of the start of the reporting, right? You've got the red team company coming in, and they're going to deliver a red team report. We argued last week that no, time out. It shouldn't be a red team report. It should be a purple team report. The red team report is only cool. You guys are rock stars and you're really good at what you do, but how's it helping the company, right? That's what the purple team report was doing. But I would think there would be some advantages of a blue team report saying, we went through this. These were the processes that we had before. And man, it would be really smart to put a process in place to not just address what the red team and purple team helped us figure out, but how we figure out more of those types of things that they didn't just help us figure out, but that process should help you figure out more of those.
I think I want to piggyback on that a little bit, and I do see Dev's follow-up question on this, and I'll get to that here in a second. I almost think we need to break down this idea that there is a red team report, a purple team report, a blue team report, whatever the case is. I think that you have reporting, period. Right? I think the concepts that we teach about reporting are there to convey a message, right? And so I think you may have different types of process reporting, like the incident response process, like a threat hunting process, like a pen testing process, but I don't necessarily view it as like it really is all just under the one umbrella of just security reporting. It's more just functional than it is anything else.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like, staff development kind of things. Man, that would be a really interesting perspective to get maybe a junior person sitting in on the exercise, a middle line person, and maybe a tier 3 person sitting in on the exercise, and each one of them kind of creates their own persona based, perceptions of how the exercise changed how they will go about their job.
And here's one of the other things that I want to harp on reporting, because you bring up a really good point. And it looks like we do have the hype train started. Thanks to everybody who's contributing to the hype train. This is an opportunity to get exclusive emotes and rewards by participating in the hype train. So got about 5 minutes to participate on that one. We're already at level 3. Let's see if we can push it through and get some more some more awesome emotes for that. While there are certain organizations and training opportunities that have you write a report, I think that there is a lack of actual training material on how to write a report.
I totally agree. You Google it. There's nothing out there either.
No. There's nothing out there. There are certifications out there that do require you to write a report for the exam. But if you look, I do actually think that there aren't enough educational pieces of content that say, here's what the business cares about. Here's what you should have in a report. Things like that. Devnol Zen says, in all seriousness, will INE be bringing in volunteers to trial new content before release? Yes, there is a process being put in place with these new cloud certs to beta test the cloud certs, and that is part of a bigger effort that we have to bring in more formal beta testing process. Yes. Is it possible to be a beta tester for new content in INE? Yes. Make sure you have notifications turned on your social accounts so that you do know when the beta is announced. We're trying to do it, and again, you'll hear me reference Blizzard quite a lot. We're trying to create some mechanism whereby you can volunteer to be in the beta program, and we'll use that as a lottery system to pick people from to beta the any of the upcoming content that we've got. I pulled that one over here. Hold on. Will the new INE courses include report writing that was making in the EC PPT V2? Yet to be determined. I hope so. 100%. Okay. Happy to answer more questions on INE, but I'm going to press this on with our main topic tonight. I do want to... we did a good job of teaching Jeff Purple Teaming 101 last week. We're going to see if we can't take him to another level tonight. Before we dive deep into that, I do want to show you a little bit of where I've been getting the content to teach this purple teaming stuff. Obviously, it is a collection of stuff that I've built and done myself, but instead of generating a lot of the content over from scratch, it's always great to use somebody else's content. And I've always told you all that you should be maximizing as much of the free stuff that is out there on the internet. I'm also a huge advocate of that red teamers need to be adopting more purple teaming and specifically understanding the whole breach and attack simulation space. One of the reasons why I love Attack IQ and one of the reasons why I'm a huge advocate for Attack IQ is because of their academy. And I've talked about this on stream a couple times, Jeff. There is no better place right now on the internet for you to get purple teaming, MITRE, attack simulation training for free, for free, right? Which is Neil's. I was literally just on a podcast.
You said
today.
the right words.
Yeah. Well, and I was on a podcast today, and they asked me, they said, Neil, you're a CCO for a major training company. What classes or certs do you think people need to get in for cybersecurity? And I didn't mention a single INE cert or class because the three things that everybody should be doing, one of those three things that I talk about is taking free stuff. Like before you spend a dime on anything, you should take the free stuff. And I've always been an advocate of that. And so everybody, if you haven't already, do use that exclamation point Attack IQ in chat. Get a link and sign up for their academy if you have not already. It is very comprehensive, right? They have threat emulation, they have MITRE attack, they have breach and attack simulation as a learning path. They have introduction to the Fin 6 emulation plans, which we'll touch on a little bit of the emulation plans a little bit tonight. United Threat and Risk Management. So I saw Nitronic Deer in chat earlier when they talk about bringing threat and risk management together using NIST and MITRE. They've got something that's not just for the technical side, but also for the risk and governance side. Okay. What I taught to Jeff, what I taught to you last week, Jeff, and everything that that we covered last week, and then some of the stuff that we're going to cover tonight, came specifically from this purple teaming learning path. Okay. And so if you, instead of doing my typical review of a course like I did for Range Force, I decided in this case that I would actually try to teach this content to somebody, get that messaging across. And obviously last week we were successful at that. So if you're enjoying the pieces of purple teaming from last week, if you enjoy the content from this week, as we talked to Jeff about some of the stuff that we're going to talk about this week, please head on over to Attack IQ Academy. Sign up for Attack IQ Academy, take this course, take several of the other courses that they have out there. I got a lot out of it. I'm going to continue to get a lot out of it. I'm going to continue to take a lot of these courses and then try to turn around and teach some of these courses to you all online. I'm really happy with its technical accuracy. And so I'm very happy, obviously, with a lot of this content, and I didn't have to create it. So that makes me even happier. I get to use somebody else's content for once. All right, Jeff. You ready to do this thing?
You're here.
I had to get my trusty iPad out so that we can do our...
You feel more confident with it, don't you?
I am. Like, now that
if
we've
I can draw on screen, I'm happy, man.
Now that we can draw on screen, I'm happy.
Yeah, see, it beats the napkins at dinner.
It does. Can you monologue for a bit?
Especially those restaurants that used cloth napkins. They didn't appreciate that very much.
That is indeed a joke with Jeff and I. I gave some of my earliest presentations to Jeff via napkins.
It was outstanding.
At restaurants. It was indeed outstanding.
Hey, if you cannot explain something on a napkin, you haven't done well enough at thinking through how to explain it.
Awesome. So
By the way, this is a big napkin right here.
this is a big napkin.
I'm just saying, if you're going to do this on a napkin, this is a big napkin.
But it's good. It's napkin drawings really are the best because you can truly express yourself. So I got my Apple Pencil here. I got my iPad. We're gonna rehash a little bit of kind of what we did last week, Jeff. Right. So we first and foremost, we kind of hit on the big differences in the methodologies that exist between blue team. Don't want to erase over here, right? Between blue team and between red team. We talked extensively, right, how most red teamers stop at this exploit phase in their operations and don't really understand what it is that they're doing much past that. We talked a little bit about what a good purple teaming process looks like. And we focused pretty extensively, Jeff, on
timeout, talk, timeout,
talk, right? Take a break, work in parallel with both teams, and make sure that you have built-in stuff, built-in opportunities for you to talk to your teams in the process, right?
Yeah, no, I just literally I took away from last week, purple team equals timeout talk.
Timeout talk. Timeout talk. I like it. Finally, we hit on together, right? Kind of we broke down in super easy pillars, right? These 3 pillars, right? Blue, purple, and red, right? We talked about how blue has its role, right? Blue has traditionally lived to serve the business. They have a great business context. They understand the architecture of the corporation very, very well. And they have the detection mechanism. We talk about red team understanding the threat. They understand the mindset, and they understand how to do that hacker emulation. And when you bring both of those together, the biggest thing that we get out of purple teaming, Jeff, is what?
Business impact.
Business impact, what we always talk about.
What it means to them.
What it means to them. So,
and by the way, you don't see any of that in red team or their scope of works or any of that.
100%. We'll get into some of that in some of the reporting that we do, that we look at here in a little bit. I want to talk really quick before we start bashing on red team reports about this concept of threat emulation. Okay, because as I was prepping the content for tonight, I realized that is a conversation that I don't think we have often enough. Okay.
So let me ask you this. Why are you bringing that up as part of the red team, purple team, blue team conversation?
It's multifold. Okay, so if we go back to the definition of a pen tester, right, from ages ago, right, when you start at the very beginning of what is a pen tester is supposed to be somebody who hacks a network in a simulated fashion, simulating the ways that a hacker hacks a network. And when you break that definition down of pen testing, that is adversary emulation. I actually wrote about this in a paper in 2015 where the paper was actually titled Red Team Redux, where we actually talked about the next wave of pen testing, which is truly embracing this concept of adversary emulation. And now that you're starting to see it in a more comprehensive fashion, now people are trying to say, pen testing may not necessarily equal adversary emulation. Where does it fit into that conversation? When in reality, the very roots of pen testing are garnered in adversary emulation.
So do you see purple teaming as just being the natural evolution to threat emulation and attacker emulation?
I do. And I've been dying to do this talk for a while on purple teaming and BAS and things like that, because I have said that, and I've got this codified in writing, I do think that what we're teaching for purple teaming is the next natural evolution of where you should be thinking as a red teamer and as a pen tester. Because I think the industry is now finally ready to embrace that with concepts like breach and attack simulation, concepts like purple teaming, things like that. No, you can't just use, responder to get to domain admin. I know that's a troll joke, or maybe that's a good way to get me on a soapbox. If there's I don't know if anybody's running a prediction on whether they're going to get Neil on a soapbox tonight, but that's a good way to get Neil on a soapbox. Running responder to domain admin is not pen testing.
If we're putting money down on if we're going to get you on a soapbox, count me in, because we will find one.
That's not fair. That's not fair for you to participate in that. But yeah, the short answer to your point is I absolutely do see that as I think I think the difference between a good pen tester and a better pen tester, I'll draw this line in the sand as we get into this conversation, is their ability to embrace purple teaming, threat emulation, and breach and attack simulation. 100%.
Yeah, I just think the business, back in 2015, the business didn't know what the heck security did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, risk, okay, cyber, malware, whatever. But I think they're expecting a lot more out of security now than they were getting before.
100%.
And business is actually starting to get smart enough about security in general to know that, no, I don't want just a red team exercise, because that doesn't do enough for me. Mm-hmm. I want something that helps me, right? And I think the business is actually starting to get smarter on what they are expecting out of these things.
I would take it a step further and say that where we have failed in that conversation is more that the business now understands that they can ask questions about what's in it for me, whereas before it was magic in a black box. Right? When we said, oh, you need a pen test, they're like, okay, cool. The regulation says I need a pen test, and they got their pen test results. And I think after years of just getting the pen test results, now they're finally looking back and saying, what's in it for me? And I think that's the evolution that we're seeing on the business end.
Yeah, so, well, they're trying to get an ROI out of it.
Oh God, chat's gonna blow up. He said ROI. We should have a prediction on how many times we say ROI on this, but it is. We heard this with Jerry on Saturday.
You just gave me grief about it, and then you said, "Oh, but that is actually what it is."
It is actually what it is. I mean, there is ROI. There has to be. We have to, as technologists, as cybersecurity folks, we have got to embrace the conversation around ROI. Like it or not, you hear it in the conversations that we always bring up about the value of ROI. It's got to be there. So let's, if I can remember how to do this. There we go. Awesome. See, I'm creating all these complicated scenes for myself. So let's talk about it for a second, right? And so I'm going to draw my pen tester, right? That's a pen tester. Just in case people were wondering, pen tester. Typically when a pen tester begins to go into an engagement, right? What they're given a scope, right? And what is a scope? It's IP addresses, it's people, maybe it's applications, right? That's typically what you're given as a pen tester when you walk into the room. And then what do? You take that stuff back and you're like, well, I'm going to nmap these IP addresses. I'm going to phish these people. And I'm going to do some web application testing on those web apps. And then you report. When you look at that process, that is how, at the very heart of it, that is a very simple process that almost every pen tester goes through in today's modern, and when I say, I'm saying generally speaking, there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but if you were to look at almost any consulting company's pen test, that's the general process that they go through. When I go back and I talk about what you're supposed to do as a pen tester, where do you see that in this process?
Seems to be missing there.
There, right?
Well, and I think this is the simple process because it's worked for years, and why deviate from it? Because this keeps them coming back. Nope, you failed. Nope, you failed again. Oh, you failed again. I'll be back next year to show you that you failed again. Yeah. And that's all the reports have traditionally done is said you failed, and it doesn't give you a recipe for, concocting up the right security posture and program.
Here's the biggest reason, right? And here's what I think, what should, let's kind of go over here. Let's do what it should be based on the definition of a pen tester, right? Is you have our fancy dancy pen tester here, right? He receives.
Why are you drawing them with such a big head, Neil?
We know how it is. We know how pen testers are. They've all got big heads. Right? They get a scope, they get a set of IP addresses, they get a set of people, right? And they get a set of apps, right? What needs to happen from here is a threat model. Who is the threat of this company? What TTPs, what tactics, techniques, or procedures does that threat model use, or does that threat actor, or does that piece of software, whatever the case is, what does it use? And then how do they use them? And what is their motivation?
Okay, so I'm going to push back a little bit here.
Go for it.
Because you look at a threat model, there are literally hundreds of them, and it's not like they're overlapping, right? And so you've got a scope. How many of those threat models do you pen test for? Because you really can't do all of them, can you? Is it realistic?
That is a fantastic question. It's almost like, Jeff, I'm teaching you something.
Scary thought.
Scary thought.
I'll be quiet. I don't want anyone to have a misconceived.
I don't want anybody to know that I'm actually learning something on this stream.
No, heaven forbid.
That's exactly the pushback that you get from modern day pen testers, and especially modern day pen testing companies. Is, well, I don't have time for that. There's literally, if you go to MITRE, there's so much there. I don't have time to research threat actors, to understand who they are, understand their motivations, understand the tools, and understand how they implement those.
Yeah. And are you saying that the pen tester should be determining the who, what, how, and motivation, or is that the business? Or is it a combination of the two?
It is a combination of the two. It requires you to understand, right? When you do a threat model, understand.
Wait, so the scope of work is not their contract. They need to go from the scope and actually try to do something to align to what the business needs.
Exactly.
There is. I got to tell you, the way scope of works are written. I'll throw my own company under the bus on this as well. Every scope of work you ever write is so that there is not something called scope creep.
Right.
Because that is where pro-serve individuals are out doing way more than they were supposed to do, and they don't ever get around to doing what they were actually contracted to do.
Right.
So the scope creep is a real thing. How do you manage that with what you're asking them to do here? Because it seems like that's like an impossible task to go from scope into the next conversation or threat model, which could totally redefine the scope.
Their scope creep in pen testing is hard. It happens. And in this type of model, it requires you to be far more objective about what it is that you're going to do in a penetration test than what the traditional pen testing model allows for, right?
Yep.
This model, to our point, is very simple, right? It's, to your point, it's repeatable. It's it allows
definable. It takes the risk and it gets rid of it from the perspective of, I'm going to have an outside person come in, and I really don't want them to do everything under the sun because I don't have enough budget dollars to pay them to do it. And conversely, if we have a will not exceed clause in there, how do I get the people to deliver what they know is right to deliver? But at the end of the day, they have a job to do for a certain amount of money. And unless they stick to the scope, they're never going to be successful with it.
But here's the problem. On the reporting side, the report that we get out of this, which we've seen,
Yeah.
is subpar, and we'll review some of those reports here in a little bit, right? It doesn't have business context in it, right? It doesn't seek to allow for risk acceptance, right?
What do
Because
you mean by risk acceptance?
so when we talk about risk acceptance, right, there's a couple different ways to look at it, right? You've got, so in risk, you can either remediate it, you can mitigate it, or you can accept it,
Okay.
right? So if you have a vulnerability, 1710, right, the WannaCry vulnerability, right, Eternal Blue, you can either remediate it through patching, you can mitigate it through firewalling, VLANing, EDR, application whitelisting, right, something like that, or you can accept it by saying that below the risk register on an isolated system.
I'm just going to buy cyber insurance.
I'm gonna
It'll
buy
be fine.
cyber. I'm gonna buy cyber insurance. Be quiet. Yeah,
Just trying to get you out of soapbox tonight.
yeah, yeah. I hear you. But risk acceptance is a reality that I don't think a lot of pen testers realize. But this model right here has pushed more and more organizations to just blanket accept risk, because in this model, they end up with so much coming out of a report that they can't remediate it and they can't mitigate it, and so they just accept the risk blanketly across the environment.
So when you see these reports come out, and I know you've seen way more than I have, do they ever prioritize the risks to say, hey, we see out of this, we see 25 risks. Out of those 25, we see these 10. Like we talked a little bit about this last week, right? Yeah, but this one's never going to be a risk for us because of X, Y, and Z. But do they ever go through and say, yeah, don't worry about these, or prioritize this one over that one? Or do they just give you a blanket statement that says these are all your risks? Go
The
take them.
majority of pen testing companies out there do the latter part. Here is a report with all your risk, and I'll show you it's almost like you saw the reports that I was going to show you. I know you haven't, but the reports that I'm about to show you literally do just that. And I can't disclose what company they come from, but if I were, you would be shocked, because it is one of the most predominant managed security companies with pen testing practices that are out there. And that's the type of reporting that they put out.
Wouldn't all that would take, though, to close the loop there, just be to, okay, can we have a 3-hour meeting with your security architect team? And I just want to go through these vulnerabilities, and I want you to share with me if this is going to be a big issue or a non-starter for you guys. And then I can include that in the report, because then that way it removes the consultant from having the liability, which all this stuff is coming down to liability and legal, right?
Yeah.
But it removes them from having liability of giving that recommendation and prioritization, because, oh yeah, well, you told us that this was the lowest priority and that's the one that hit us, so we're suing you because you gave us bad advice. But if you have that conversation with the security team and the architecture team, and they say, oh no, that's not an issue, you can actually put that in the notes and say, your own team says that this is probably not an issue. They would prioritize it this way.
The only reason I would have a hard time agreeing with that is because, and this will be one of the few times that you hear me say that I'm glad that we've coined a new term in the industry like purple teaming. It's why I'm glad that we do see the emergence of breach and attack simulation, companies in the market space, is because I think that's what it's going to take for us to force the conversation that says legacy pen testing and legacy red teaming is not as effective as it could be for all these problems that we've seen over the years, and like you're addressing. And Dr. Geller.
Exactly. I was just going to say, Dr. Geller totally hit on exactly what we were talking about. Absolutely. This is a liability thing.
Right.
And the whole idea of scope and writing a scope of work document is to minimize the liability and scope creep.
Yeah, 100%. It becomes that quintessential. Why did you attack that system? You didn't have permission. It wasn't in scope and things like that. And so it definitely handcuffs, a pen tester's ability to find true risk in the failures that we have traditionally allowed to be in place for this definition of scope. 100%. So back over here to our ideal model, and we'll talk about this one in the sense of it being the ideal model, is that and we'll do this one in purple as appropriate, right? Is once you get to the threat model side, then what you're actually able to do is you're supposed to attack. I'll even do that one exclamation point. Attack! Attack!
That needs to be captured too.
No. I'm in a tiny window. BSEC won't be able to grab that one in the tiny window. It's not up in the big screen.
It might just need to be an audio. It might need to be an audio clip.
Attack! What you're able to do.
By the way, can you go in the big window and do that again for us?
Just so BSEC can grab it and meme it?
Yeah.
Attack!
Perfect. Thank you.
There you go. We'll see if BSEC can grab that one.
My work here is done. I have now contributed more to this stream than any other stream. So, okay.
Okay. So now that you've got your threat model, now that you've done your actual threat modeling on the company, now you can actually build your pen test or your red team attack. What does that look like? That means that whatever your who was from up here, and just because I prepped this one, we'll use this one. Let's say that the predominant threat that particular organization is worried about is APT 41. Now you can go from APT 41 over to MITRE, which we have done a stream on MITRE. Okay, and you can use their attack framework on MITRE, and you can literally pull the TTPs and the software that APT 41 uses, and now you can go and you can do your pen test. What do you think about that so far, Jeff?
It seems to me like it would make it much less of a very high level, big head consulting red team exercise and turn it into a cookie cutter kind of point, click, cut, paste, execute.
Very much so.
It turns it into a much more repeatable and lower level activity that I don't know if you actually necessarily need to pay anyone else to do for you. This you could do yourself, right?
It's pretty straightforward when you look at it. You know why? And it's not a soapbox, but I'm gonna grab a bunch of my pen tester friends.
Are you sure it isn't?
I'm gonna grab a whole lot of my pen tester friends by the scruff of their neck, and I'm gonna call them out here in a little bit. You know why pen testers don't want to do this? Because it's not fun. Because in their mind, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Here's the reason why. Let's look at it this way, right? Pen testing.
It's not fun, and it also minimizes what they can charge.
Well, we can talk about the fiscals, definitely, but let's look at a pen test, right? In the traditional sense, right? If a computer has, and for those who see that, I mean, we could obviously easily do MS10, MS17, 10. Wow, if I could write, right? These are exploits that you've got easy to exploit code in Metasploit. And so what they do, right, here's the procedure, right? We go back over here, right? Pen tester gets a list of IP addresses. They land in a network. They nmap out. They find a whole bunch of Windows machines, and boom, they mass scan all those in-scope IP addresses with MS1710, and they get that cool little interpreter, and they start doing the root dance. They're like, yeah, I got root because I popped a shell on a box. Woo! Rocking, right? And they do that dance.
One's dismantled and doesn't do anything for the company.
You're right. What's the risk? Right? Is it even on the domain controller? Can you even
Right.
get domain creds from it? Right? Does it have crown jewels? Right? And on top of that, chances are the vulnerability scanner, their vulnerability management process already picked up on it. They already know it exists. If they haven't patched
and they weren't worried about it.
Right. If they haven't patched it, they already know that either their patching process sucks or they've risk accepted it.
Yeah.
Right. And so because pen testers, and this gets back to our mindset over here, right? That pen testers are all about that exploit phase. They're all about that exploit phase. Right? This model over here that we're talking about right here doesn't care about the exploit phase. What it cares about is, am I vulnerable to my threat?
Yeah.
Am I vulnerable to the actual people, organization, software that is actually posing a threat to my organization?
All right. So I'm going to push back a little bit on this question too. You see the proliferation of ransomware attacks and APT attacks and, new kinds of attacks, right? Everyone's concerned about the day zeros.
Yeah.
The reality is, APT 41 is not a day zero. It's known, it's documented, it's, modularized. It's got a process for you to test to see if it exists in your network as a vulnerability. And I understand that you got to take care of those basic blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
But wouldn't a red team exercise be used for the more sophisticated things and to see if the more sophisticated kinds of attacks you would be susceptible to?
I want to answer that one.
It's not these cookie cutters. That's my point.
Yes.
There's kind of the cookie cutter segment, which that to me, cool. It's seemingly got a point and click methodology where you can test already, right?
Correct.
With a relatively low level person in your organization, not even needing an outside consultant. Hey, go run through all of the MITRE threat modes and see what we need to hit on. Basic blocking and tackling over there, and then let's use the red team for the sophisticated stuff.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is we, because of this mentality that we've boiled pen testing and red teaming down to, red teaming and pen testing has been nothing more than glorified vulnerability scanning. And we've come to accept it as an industry because of this model and because it's called a pen test, and we accept that this is good enough when in fact we should be striving to raise the bar on our pen testing and on our red teams to actually do more advanced pen test, red teaming, adversary emulation. And Thornflint says, Neil isn't doing something cookie cutter like what you're suggesting by grabbing the specific TTPs from the MITRE framework, pretty narrow scope, and the reason that vulnerability assessment teams exist. Exactly, that's my point. That's exactly what I'm saying is that's not the pen testing job, right? To go through and be able to find 1710 across the network. If we go back here, the red team understands the threat. The red team understands the red mindset, right? They understand how to actually act as a hacker. The problem is this is not acting as a hacker. A hacker doesn't get a scope of IP addresses and a list of people and a list of applications and attack an organization based on them. There is a group that has a set of TTPs that's in their toolbox that they use every time. Let's take a look at the ransomware ones that Jeff points out. DarkSide goes out and looks for the Pulse VPN vulnerability, open RDPs out to the internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera on the line. If your threat model is DarkSide ransomware, you're out there simulating DarkSide ransomware on your environment. That's your hacker emulation mindset. I'm trying to push people away from this mentality that says, well, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to scan the entire environment looking for 1710, pop a shell on it, and say that I've got a successful pen test. That should be the purpose of the vulnerability assessment teams, is to do that. Right?
Yeah, and
Raising that
that's
bar up.
more of an internal team doing the basic blocking and tackling.
Yes.
And use the red team pen test team for sophisticated attacks.
Exactly. This is all about raising that bar more on what the teams are doing in the corporate world.
Or maybe even just segment out the value of the endpoints that are being attacked and saying, these are our crown jewels. That's what I want to see if we are vulnerable with the pen test. Go try to get in.
Yeah.
And everything else, we're going to have our vulnerability management tool or our vulnerability assessment team deal with.
Exactly. Crypto Mathematician says, isn't it possible to build the threat model regarding the founded vulnerabilities? I think you're trying to say, do you find the vulnerabilities and then build your threat model around that? No, your threat model is, if I'm, oh God, best way to put this one. If I'm manufacturing cookies, Iranian threat actors that are interested in disrupting oil and gas and finance aren't in my threat model. Right? So why research their TTPs if they're not in my threat model? Well, Neil, there may be some overlap between their vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities in your threat model. Then just focus on your threat model and you'll still get to those vulnerabilities. Building the threat model, and again, when we talk about, and again, I'll harp on it again, and Jeff and I talk about it on the stream a lot, right? Is business context, business impact, right? You can walk to the board and say, Colonial Pipeline just got hit with DarkSide. We are also in the pipeline business, and that is in our threat model, and here's what we're doing to protect against that specific threat that appear in our vertical just got hit by. That is, Jeff, is that business language that you think would resonate with the board of directors?
Yeah, they would love you for it too. And they would invite you back for their next quarterly board meeting to say, hey, what are you doing now? What do you see as the threats that we need to make sure that we're deciding upon?
The board doesn't care that you've got 150 boxes with 1710. What they care about is Colonial Pipeline just paid $4.5 million in ransom, was all over the news because of a ransomware attack from DarkSide. What they want answered is, are we protected from DarkSide ransomware? Could that happen to us?
That's exactly what they want to know. What I just saw in the news and my peer, because all those guys know each other, right? They go to the same conferences. Hey, Joe just had a nightmare of a month. Am I going to have a nightmare of a month next month?
100%.
That's what they want to know.
100%. And you're not going to be able to do that. And I would die on a sword on this one. You can't give that answer to the CISO, to the board of directors, with this style of pen testing.
So the CISOs need to ask for a better kind of pen test.
Yes. They need to.
That's where it starts, right? I mean, the CISO is the one that drives a lot of the pen test scope. They say, I need a pen test. I need to communicate to the board for these assets or whatever that were covered. They're the ones that started, aren't they?
That's fair. I mean, the CISOs need to drive to the business that there are better ways to do pen testing, red teaming, purple teaming, right? Threat emulation. There are better ways to do it. I think CISOs still have an education problem where they're used to just saying pen testing, and they'll say to a SOC director, hey, go get me a pen test. And it's up to the SOC director to decide, interpret, if you will, what the CISO wants to have accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thornflint says, I think professional pen testers offer the service you're describing, full scope black box, but many companies aren't willing to pay the cost. How do we incentivize companies? I would disagree on full scope black box. I actually brought full scope pen testing to the MSP that I helped stand up in Michigan. Um, you know, full scope still takes us back to saying, hey, your entire IP address range is in scope. Every person in your company is in scope, and every application in your company is in scope. When we say full scope, right, what we're saying is we're not going to be narrowly focused on this set of IP addresses or these people or these apps. That does not bring into full scopes, don't bring in threat modeling. Honestly, the only time I've ever seen pen testers adopt threat modeling is when they're actually, just they realize that they can do it themselves and do it as part of their normal engagement scope. That's the only time I've seen pen testers actually do threat modeling. I do think that we do need to incentivize pen testing companies to stop doing crappy pen test. And I think that we need education, to what I was saying before, on the CISO front to not buy crappy pen test.
Yeah, and I mean the good CISOs that I know are the ones who are always driving to business impact.
Yeah.
They're the ones that already do that just naturally, and they drive their employees to think that way. I think the days of CISOs just blindly doing pen tests is over, because I don't think they look at it as a checkbox anymore. Especially the good ones. The good ones are how am I going to use this to better my security stance?
Yeah, agreed. Wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree. All right. So questions about threat emulation as a whole.
Yes.
Okay. What you got?
Which one to use? How do you prioritize? What's the methodology? Do you just go to MITRE and read through all of them and say, "Oh yeah, that one fits me. Yeah, that one fits me. No, no, no. Yes, yes, no. Okay, that's in my scope." Like, how do you determine? How do you prioritize?
I'm so grateful that you asked for that. Did I write it down? I didn't write it. Did I write it down? I
Good,
didn't.
because if you already wrote it down and I didn't like see it, then it takes me back to like 8th grade history class where they're like, "Yeah, I already answered that."
No. But I had people reach out to me after last week's episode, and they said that the thing that resonated with them, one of the things that resonated with them last week, was when we said that pen testing needs to be a program, not a project.
Yeah.
And so what you're asking comes from the establishment of a program, not just looking at pen testing, red teaming as a project.
Because it like, if I'm going to finish your sentence, it means that you have thought through that I can't do all of this day one, but I need to prioritize it.
Exactly. This is so back to Thorne's question about how do we incentivize companies. Companies who give pen testing services, they look at pen testing as a very transactional business. To your point, Jeff, you said at the beginning, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the assessment, I'm going to give the report, and I'm going to get out, and I'll come back next year and get it done. But we have to move pen testing away from that.
After I've told you failed.
After I've told you failed and you're going to get hacked tomorrow, right? I'm just going to go have a nice day and collect my paycheck, right? But by moving the industry and moving the concept of pen testing, red teaming, purple teaming together to a program, you can then answer the questions that you're answering up there. As long as we treat it like a transactional business, that question is hard to answer by the folks providing the pen testing services.
So why, like, I've got to think that there's a full service kind of consulting firm who thinks through this in a way that isn't, well, I'm just going to take my yearly dividend check of doing my yearly pen test. And they think about it differently and say, I'm going to help you be a better business and de-risk your environment. And I'm going to be prescriptive on what kind of business you're in, who are your customers, who are your suppliers, and I am going to tell you which things we should test for first. Why is that not existing right now?
This is where I blame.
Or is it? I just haven't seen it.
This is where I blame the CISOs for that, because the CISOs still view pen testing as a checkbox item, either from internal audit or from their PCI compliance, or insert anything else from here. And so CISOs just view it as a line item for a one-time transaction on their budget that says, I just need to pay $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for a pen test this year and go forth and do it. And this is why I think we need to educate CISOs that pen testing can be done, needs to be done in a better / different way. So I blame the CISOs for that one.
All right.
Black Knight says, question, how often do companies do a full free reign pen test, be it black box or gray box? Almost never. To Thorne's point earlier, most consulting companies, if we go back here to this scope problem right here, literally every company that does a pen test asks the scope question. Well, what's in scope, right? What do you want me to test, right? And they're typically done in different subnet classes, whatever, right? Whether it's /24, /16, /8, or some mixture, of any of those things. And there's usually some model that says, well, if it's 22, or if it's 24, I'll charge $25K. If it's a /16, I'll charge $100K. And if it's a /8, then I'll charge $300K, right? And so then they give that over in a proposal over to a company and says, well, my budget is really only for this. So, you've got 255 IP addresses that you can pen test. Well, when I was at Abbott, there were 150,000 employees. So there were at least 150,000 IP addresses, not including our assets in the cloud or anything else that we had to
probably
test.
Were north of 300K.
Yeah. We had two /8s just externally facing the internet. Yeah. Right?
Wow.
And so when you do that, when you say full on pen test like that, this is what it boils down to is they'll say, well, it takes us that long to scan all the IP addresses, so of course we have to charge you $500,000 for it. Follow up, then how does the company truly know their weakness? Thank you very much. That's exactly why we're talking about purple teaming, is because
it's a rhetorical question.
100%. Thank you for that. That is exactly why we're talking about purple teaming, and that's why I'm a fan of breach and attack simulation for the reasons that we're going to talk about, is because it gets you to a better conversation of where your real weaknesses are.
Well, and to the point earlier, if you can take some of that function and bring it internal and just tie it to, okay, we're going to use a consultant to prioritize, look at APT 41 first, then next. You do some of those point, click, drag, drop, execute kind of stuff internally.
Yeah.
Then you use that external consultant for the more mindful, heavy kind of things, the heavy lifting stuff.
Agreed.
That's what will drive down the cost, and you'll get way more value out of it.
Completely agree with that. I want to talk about threat emulation for a second. I'm moving a couple things around on my screen so that I can bring.
You started talking about threat emulation at an hour ago.
Why you got to be like that, Jeff? Why you got to be like that?
Are we actually going to talk about it this time?
We're actually really going to talk about it this time. So obviously describing it here, right? You can kind of see what I've done here with this process. I actually have at my disposal a spreadsheet that does this process that I'm actually super excited to share with everybody here. So I'm going to take my iPad, I'm going to put it over here, and then we're going to do this guy. Awesome, fantastic. That worked and without any hiccups whatsoever. If you take the purple teaming course from Attack IQ, you can get this threat assessment worksheet. And so as we were putting the content together for this, and as I was describing this out, I was like, this spreadsheet is probably the closest thing that I've seen to accurately allow you to do these types of threat emulation exercises. And so when you look at it, this is a one-pager spreadsheet, allows you to identify your verticals, identify your key competitors and peers, which actors have targeted in the past, and which have been breached and how. So again, 4 super easy threat model questions that anybody can ask of themselves. In this case, the first threat that they wanted to identify was APT41. And so if we go back over here to our fancy schmancy MITRE attack chart that we have here. So hopefully everybody's familiar with the MITRE attack page. We'll zoom in on this guy just a little bit. There we go. Awesome. We can simply, so in this case on our spreadsheet, we've got APT41. We're going to come over here to groups. We're going to look for APT41 here. And it's got a list of all of our tactics, techniques, and procedures that APT41 uses. Now, putting these into the spreadsheet is kind of a pain in the butt. And so if you hop over here to the attack navigator layers, you can view this in another browser window, and it will generate for you a super nice visualization of all of the TTPs that APT41 uses, which is effectively what you would go through and you would put into each of these.
Looks a lot like a process tree.
Oh my God, looks a lot. And guess what this has just done, which I love even more, Jeff. You literally have just created an attack map. Like if we wanted to get way more visual with it, this is what you've done.
And by the way, if you detect it at step 4, you know what step 5 is going to be.
Exactly.
So get ahead of the attack.
So you can get ahead of the attack. You can stop being responsive and you can start being proactive in your attack mitigation. Right?
So I was actually just talking to a SOC manager earlier today, and he said literally our number one goal this year is to move up a step. Just keep moving up a step in that kill chain, that attack chain.
And that's that's where most modern SOCs are moving towards. They need the help of the red team through these threat emulation exercises to be able to do it. This is your job as a red teamer. Let me say that again. This is your job as a red teamer. Not to exploit 1710 and get domain admin and laugh yourself all the way to a purchase order, right? Or an invoice. Right? Your job is to help, what Jeff just said, help the blue team move up in the kill chain. Right? And so, again, that's why I was super excited when I saw this, is because this very much captures...
I'm going to tell you, go back to the MITRE page again and show them how to get from like those steps again. Walk through those steps again, because this right here is probably one of the best things a noob coming into cybersecurity and trying to figure out why they have to detect certain TTPs, why it matters, and like just walk them through. Okay, this is what I'm susceptible to. It is APT41, and these are the things I need to be looking out for.
Absolutely,
this helps them do their day job.
Absolutely. So, super easy threat modeling right here. Super easy threat modeling. What is your vertical, right? What is your vertical? Are you oil and gas? Are you FinSec? Are you retail, right? What is your vertical? Who are your key competitors, peers, and partners in that vertical? Which actors, you're probably in a vertical, most verticals to this day have been hacked at some point in time in the past. You should have it. There should be a good amount of information that talk about the threat actors that have targeted that vertical in the past. And have any of those companies been breached, and how have they been breached? Right here. Boom. Threat modeling in its easiest sense. I don't know of a pen tester who looks at this and says, that's too much work. I can't do that ahead of a pen test. If they're if a pen tester is saying that, then I would say they're not doing their job. Okay? If a pen tester can't fill in these 4 boxes, they're not doing their job. Okay? In this case,
And it's that last box that will take a little bit of time because that's a fair amount of Googling. Like, but that's all it is.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's all like, okay, which ones are at least public?
yeah,
Have been breached, because that all has to be notified, right? And who did it? How do they do it? What do they use?
yeah.
That's all. That's all really important information, because that is the cell in the Excel document here that ties directly down to APT 41.
That's right.
That's why you put APT 41 there.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that's where you start diving into the process tree.
That's right. Right. So now after all this, you've decided that one of your key threats that you need to worry about is APT 41. So to Jeff's point, we come back over here to our fancy dancy miter.attack.org. We come over here to groups. We scroll on down and we find APT 41, because that's the first threat actor group that we need to be concerned about, right? Because that's what our threat model suggests that we need to be concerned about. We pull up APT 41, and you can obviously go through here and read the different domains, the IDs, the names, and everything else that you got, but we're all visual people, and we all love to see things visually. And so if you go up here to attack navigator layers, I'll close this guy down over here. Yes, I want to leave. Attack navigator layers, you hit the drop down, you hit view, and boom, you are literally presented with the map of how APT 41 goes through the MITRE ATT&CK process to exploit an organization. You can then pull these back, pull them over into our nifty spreadsheet here, or you can create this cool little emulation map right here that basically goes through what APT 41 will do to gain access to a system from initial access to profit. And now, to Jeff's point, you can pen test in a purple team engagement and find out explicitly and directly where the blue team is failing to detect the adversary, which is your job as a pen tester, is to simulate the adversary to bolster the cyber defense of an organization. Mic drop. Just like that. Just like that.
Totally agree.
Questions, Jeff, on this one, on threat emulation?
No, I think it's a multi-step process, and as long as you walk through the methodology step by step, it's not daunting.
Yeah.
I think where a lot of people get wrapped around the axle is they say, well, gee, it could be literally 150 different threat modes that I could be having to look into, right? So how do I pick up the right model and dive into it? And then, oh my gosh, you look at that one, and there's literally, 200 processes in that one attack.
Yeah.
Right. That are all mapped out for you, but there's still 200. I have to go through each one of those and kind of look at them. That's where it will seem daunting, but if you go through it and prioritize, this is our threat model that we have to be leery of first, our secondary, our tertiary, etc. And then you just walk through that priority step by step. That's what makes this much more doable. And
on top of that, to one of the things that I love to harp on, processes, like pen testers hate process. I don't know of almost any cybersecurity or technologist that loves process, right? But the more you become habitual about doing those threat models, you can actually make it part of your normal pen testing process, and it becomes just as fast as running an Nmap scan. Look, what are you doing while that Nmap scan is running? Like, you're probably reading Reddit or Twitter, right?
Yeah.
So why can't you spend that time doing your threat model instead? Right?
Yep.
Like, it's not that hard. Vortex Hayes, glad to see you in chat again, Vortex. Which have been breached and how? Where would you find that? And is that also on MITRE, or does a federal agency have a database of breaches that have been reported? There are lots of open databases about companies that have been breached. To Jeff's point, it's probably just Googling and going down rabbit holes to find other industries and verticals. Healthcare, like I know that there is indexes that say here are all the companies that have been breached for 2021 or 2020 or things like that. I know the FDA keeps a record of things that have been reported to the FDA from an incident perspective. And so depending on either the nature of the regulated entity that's governing that company or how public that breach was, will help determine what some of that is. We do still suffer from a problem where not every breach is publicly reported. And so that may prove to be challenging in the overall search of answering that question. Is if it was a small breach or something that didn't regulatorily have to be reported, that may be difficult to find.
But I think that's going to affect the prioritization of that list rather than the exhaustiveness of that list.
I would agree with that. 100%.
I think you're still going to be able to, grab the list from, either a service provider or a government agency or whatever, but you're still going to have to do the research on Google.
Yeah, agreed. You want to beat up on some pen test reports real quick?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's beat up on a couple of pen test reports. All right, I'm gonna pull this over here.
I thought that's all we were going to do tonight. Three-quarters of the way through, and we're like just getting to it.
I know, but I had to I felt
actually no, that was a really good diagram and building out like how the red team, purple team needs to actually go about defining what they're going to test. I think that was a really useful thing to walk through.
Yeah, I agree. The optimizing you suggest is great. Why wouldn't companies develop a scrape for MITRE threat, incorporate it into vulnerability assessment scans, and tell the blue team lead, review this and train your analyst? What's the value in keeping the red team from the C-level's perspective? The red team needs to evolve. That's kind of what we're saying, is that the red team needs to evolve.
And there's like our product has MITRE TIDs tied in right to the product, so you would end up seeing it. All the products now with NGAV are looking for this. Almost all of them are trying to do MITRE attack, vectoring with their product. We're seeing this. It's tied to this. Look for this. Further information here.
Agreed.
I think that in and of itself is going to drive the red team to be more, targeting some of those more sophisticated things.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly agreed. Okay. As you can tell, I've done my ever-loving best to redact this pen test report that I was able to fish up.
Good job. You left a couple
words here and there.
Stuff.
Yeah.
3 words. You left
3 words.
The.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
We've done our best to try to go through and redact everything. I don't claim that it's perfect. Hopefully I can get the point across. Obviously I did try to pick one that was relatively older, but I can tell you that this is still pretty relevant from pen test reports that I've seen literally within the last couple of years. Last year, as a matter of fact, a report that I viewed by a similar company like this for a similar organization, it's still very similar. There's a lot to beat up here, Jeff. And so I want to try to hit on some parts that and again, when I talk about where this came from, this didn't come from Joe's Pen Testing Shack, right? This came from a publicly traded multi-$100 million consulting company. It's pretty significant influencing corporation in the cybersecurity industry. And so when we look at this pen test report, there's obviously the executive overview that talks about the summary of findings, the dates that it was hacked, pretty standard stuff, right, that you've got here. And then the summary of findings, here is the definition of popping you in the face with the summary of findings. So I skipped over obviously the scope information at the top. Let's consider this, Jeff. You are the executive audience and you're looking at this page. What are your thoughts? Jeff, this is the first time Jeff has seen this report. This is the first time
Why
Jeff...
do I have 5 high vulnerabilities? What are those doing in my environment? Go solve those.
That's all you see. That's all you see.
That's all I see. Is that not all you see?
That is all I see. But I don't know anything about those 5 high risk vulnerabilities.
I just see high risk, and I've got 5 of them.
This is what he's talking. This is what he's talking about right here. 5
Actually,
high risk.
I was looking at the diagram because I didn't read anything.
That's a very good point.
Every executive is going to do exactly the same thing.
That is a very, very, very good point. That is a very good point. Let's make that line a little bit smaller. Jeff didn't even read here. He just saw the graph right here and said, "What are those 5? Go fix them." Didn't read anything. You haven't read anything else here, have you?
No.
Useless.
I saw a password in there. I'm like, okay, yeah, I hate my password too, but whatever. But yeah, no, I saw 5. I see that in red, and I don't really care about the low risk vulnerabilities. The medium, okay. Once you fix those 5, why do we have 12 of the medium? Go fix those.
Yeah,
that would be my next priority. Like that would be all I get out of this report so far.
So far, that's the only thing you get. Okay, let's move on. This is obviously an external pen test. Here are the scope IP addresses, right? This is really just kind of...
As an executive, I look at that and I say, oh, techno jargon, I don't care.
Yeah, don't care. Zero effect on me whatsoever, right?
Yep. Methodology, okay, that's how you did it. I get that. I don't care how you did it. I care about the results. I'm just reading this like I would as an executive.
Yeah.
And so far, all I have seen of interest is 5 really crappy things in my environment that shouldn't be there.
And again, this is, you can continue to see this all the way down as we continue to scan it, is useless information. This is one, and obviously I know that you look at this and this one, I want to piggyback on this one for the very reason that you're talking about, because this is exactly when we look at some of this, when we look at what we talked about and we drew on the iPad, this is all, you could tell that this is all they've done, right? They've just simply vuln scanned some IP addresses.
That was a cut and paste from another document right there.
Yep. Cut and paste.
They said, I've got 5 of these. Okay, cut, paste, drag that one over, this one over, this one over, this one. Cool. They have not modified. I would bet they probably didn't even read the verbiage inside of these boxes before they put it in the report. None
whatsoever. It's copy and paste from its vulnerability scanner.
The thing I don't like about it is you see the CVS score up there at top right. It says risk high. What is 7.5? Is it on an 8-point scale? I know it's on a 10, but still, like, is 7.5 like bad for us? I don't know. Like, there's no definition of that.
None. Yeah. This is, we don't have to go further, but this is legitimately a very, very standard. Like, this is a standard report that this and many other companies put out for a pen test report.
And by the way, the only thing that they wrote was the executive summary.
Yep. And this summary of
and that one.
Yeah, the summary of
page 1 and page 2.
Yeah, page 1 and page 2. So this is, this is the problem that we have in our industry with the way that we do pen test, is because these are the types of reports that are output. And I just saw somebody say it in chat, right? This is hard to watch if this is what an exec does. This is exactly what an exec does. Like it or not, when an exec gets a pen test report, this is exactly what an exec does. We wouldn't be
By the
having this.
way, the only reason I know this is exactly what an exec does is because I have, in my career, written reports and provided it to an exec, and they have ripped it apart. And it was not a very fun day for Jeff.
Yeah. But
But
that's
I literally go through all of my writing now and say, okay, I put myself in their shoes. What do I see from this graph? The only thing I see is 5 red things, and I know they're bad.
knowing like this report is 42 pages. Do you read all 42 pages of this, or do you get to here and you see this and I'm like, if the rest of the report is
Yeah.
technical mumbo jumbo, I'm done reading.
Exactly. No, I would probably keep scrolling down, because if the formatting is the same as that, I don't read any of it. I would probably stop at that yellow section just to see if that is techno jargon, or if there's something useful. It's not useful, so I continue going down. Same format, blah blah blah. More details that show me that I've got 5 bad things in my environment. Right.
Yeah.
That's all I'm seeing.
That's all you're seeing.
And okay, now, and I'm, as an executive, you're smart enough assimilating data that you said, okay, these are part of the 12 medium things on that one graph. And then if I keep scrolling down, I'm going to see the 8 low risk things, right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah,
So
we'll eventually get down to all the
same format. Yeah, I would literally probably like fast scroll to page 30, then see if it's the same, fast scroll to page 40, see if it's the same, and see if there's a conclusion. The way most executives will never even go through that step.
Exactly.
They'll look at the executive summary, page 1 and page 2. If you've not gotten my interest on what I should do about it in that time, then you've lost me.
100%. 100%.
And I call up I'm assuming I'm the CEO or CIO. I get this report and I say, hey, CISO, go solve this. Why is this in my environment? This is your top priority. I want these 5 things off of our list by end of month.
It is.
I put some, I probably actually say end of week. I put some unrealistic time frame on it, and it doesn't even fit with our change management cycle, but whatever.
Yeah.
So a poor report, by the way, provides poor reaction.
Just because I saw somebody ask about recommendations, I did want to hit that a little bit and say, again, kind of to the point that Jeff was making before, you could tell that all of this in here is all very canned comment, which includes this remediation step right there. Very canned and generic remediation step. Upgrade your HP systems management homepage. Like, what does that actually tell anybody who's supposed to be doing any remediation on there? You're saying that the only way for me to remediate this vulnerability, again, we talk about risk, right? What were the 3 things that we said that you could do with risk? Mitigate, remediate, or accept. And this one is implying that the only thing that you can do from a remediation perspective is to do that. No value.
And then my IT department has to come to me and say, no, that's got a conflict with this other tool set. We can't go to 7.4 until we upgrade this other one.
And let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit again back to the executive perspective. Remember, as much as we want to think that CISOs are super technical, most CISOs are not. The CIO is not super technical. The board of directors is not super technical. And so when a PwC or somebody else, Deloitte, gives them a pen test report and it says remediation, upgrade to HP systems management homepage, that's what the board, the CIO, and the CISO tells to the teams for remediation. That's the only option you have. Go, to Jeff's point, go fix it. This is what they hear as go fix it.
Yep. So things that, I think we need to pivot on this to say, okay, what are some really logical things that would have immediately improved this report? Number 1, for each of those 8 vulnerabilities, they should not be on page 5. The things that you are telling them to go fix, that is on page 2, and you need to then say, here's the impact, here's how is this one box that is this issue, or is this 5,000 or 50,000?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, like, is this affecting one minor thing? Is it affecting 50,000 major things? Right? That there's no context around that. So that bare minimum, that has to be in this section here.
Yeah.
The second thing is, even if this was exploited, what is the impact of that? Right? There's no description around what that CV will tell you a little bit, but not to an executive. And then there's really no, is this a hard thing or an easy thing to do this remediation? Those three things, if you add that to each of these risks, that would make this a way better report.
The reason, though, that I feel like this report and other reports like it miss the impact statement is because the pen testing company they actually can't exploit this vulnerability. And so instead of putting it as a low risk, because it wasn't actually exploited, they simply relied on the CVSS score.
100%.
Right? And said it's high based solely on the CVSS score instead of risk mitigating it down.
Because it's on one box and it's network segmented.
Or there's no active exploit in the wild. There's no proof of concept code. It's never been seen to actually be a real threat to an organization.
And that's a great point. If you did not understand what Neil just said, listen to last week's session, because he walked through that. It was about a 15-20 minute section, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat it, but it was super good in how it described how to actually grade if this is a bad thing or not.
Yeah.
And that's what is missing in all of these reports is the so what. Does this matter to us?
Yeah. Real quick, I do want to pivot to a better report, but not necessarily a red team report, but more of a purple team report. And I say better, it's still not perfect, and I do still have some problems with it. Jeff, I'm sure you will too, just based on the fact that I know you. We've been friends for a really long time.
And I have a hard time with a lot of things. Is that what you're saying? I find the fault in everything.
You definitely are pretty astute and adept, and so I do. I know that I've got some issues with it. I know if I've got some issues with it, you're going to have some issues with it. But when we talk about moving things in a positive direction on red teaming and purple teaming and things like that, I am in the Attack IQ platform. This is their breach and attack simulation software. I will be doing an entire demo on this in July. So we don't have to get hung up on this from a demonstrative perspective. There's obviously a lot to unpack here between the different assessments, the different scenarios, things like that. But for the sake of this conversation around reporting, Jeff, I did go ahead and run a couple of scenarios just on the test environment that they gave me. And inside of here, let's just start with a dashboard like this. And let's see if this is a move in the right direction when you think about this as an executive. If I were to put this on a threat card, like a one-page PowerPoint for you, how does this hit your executive palette?
Why is everything 50%?
Because I'm in a test environment.
Because you're wishy-washy. Whatever. It's about middle of the road.
Sometimes we're good. Sometimes we're bad.
Just call it 50%. We're good.
Just call it 50%. We're 50%. Don't get hung up on those details, people. It's fine.
No, I don't have an issue with it. I don't know what the overall combined means.
Yeah.
Overall prevention, I kind of get. Overall detection, I kind of guessed. And I could assume that overall combined is a some kind of marriage of those two scores.
This actually isn't a report, but when I popped into this, I was like, I can't wait for Jeff to see this dashboard because Lord knows I've given Carbon Black a heck of a time over the last 6 years over dashboarding.
You are enjoyable to listen to.
I can tell. I know this. I wanted to bring up the specific executive report that I did find in the Attack IQ platform for their executives. So again, executive summary. We know that that's going to be in almost every report that we do. We have some definitions here. This is the overall status. So let's start here as being that executive reporting.
Yeah, first blush, like, okay, numbers is good, but out of how many?
Mm-hmm.
Is total assets the total assets in my environment, or is that total assets that were tested? So that's immediately what would jump up at me from a report perspective. I think if I'm an executive, I want to understand what was the scope of the project. We have, 10,000 assets in our environment. We tested 1,000 of it to get a good lay of the land understanding across multiple asset classes. Like that would be a really good.
I agree with
that. Is a statement that I would like to see right up front.
And that was what I knew you were going to pick up on. That was what I also picked up on too, is that it's saying that these were how many were tested, but to your point, you don't know the scope of your entire environment. So we get back to kind of that quintessential red teaming pen testing thing that we talked about last week. We've talked a little bit about today, right? Which is if we're looking at the scope, is it one asset? Is it 10 assets? Is it 50% of my population? Is it 90% of my population? Is it 100% of my population, right, that we've tested?
Right.
Yeah. So I saw that and I agreed with you on that. So not bad in the sense that we at least can tell how many assets were in fact indeed realistically tested, but we're still missing what the scope of the overall assessment really is.
Yeah, and 60 results, is that good? Is that bad? Is it like what should I expect?
So because I know you like colors, let's move down to some colors.
Christmas.
I like it. Like it? So in this, when you see this, again, I want your immediate executive reaction to this one when you see it.
As an executive, I so don't care about all of the techno minutia that you just tested. Boom, 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 boom.
What is this? Why is this on an executive report?
Yeah.
Why does an executive care about this stuff? You probably could have gotten away with just this right here.
And a single line item.
Yeah.
We tested 2 scenarios over 3 assets for 20 different things, and that came out with 50-50. I have asked for a bigger environment, so I'm hoping to see some different results next time I run these tests. But yeah,
and then of course, again, more down here, same type of stuff, block, not block. The point that I want to make when this is we still struggle as an industry to create meaningful executive reports. This is something that Jeff and I
struggle with the care, no care equilibrium.
100%.
We care a lot about all that crap, and the executive doesn't care at all about that.
None whatsoever. None. This is something that Jeff and I have a huge passion for, because we think that it is because of scenarios like this. We think that it is because we continue to fail to think about executive reporting, that this is why we continue to fail to show meaningful results and spending ROIs to the executive team.
Well, and here's the reality. The executive report should be a single page, and all of this stuff, by the way, could be summarized on a single page
with like 4 bullets.
Yeah, because they're not gonna read any more than 4 bullets, and they will look at pictures. So create a really wicked picture that totally shows what you want to show them, and you get 3 bullets to explain what it means. And then you can say, based on what this means, this is our next step. Here is our ask.
Yeah. It is, we inherently, and I say this, and I implore to every cybersecurity person that's out there, we inherently want to show how awesome we are. We want to show so much stuff about what it is that we do. We don't want our work to be summarized in a handful of bullets. That is our own ego that is stopping us from actually just providing 4 bullet points to the executive leadership about what is important.
Yep. Well, and I keep harping on this with my own company. I would like executive report, if it's meaningful, should have comparative to my peers. Like if I am in manufacturing, how are my other peers in manufacturing comparing to me?
Yeah.
And you don't have to give me like confidential data because it's all summary data.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the industry average is a C plus, and you have a B minus.
Yeah.
Here's what it would take to get you to an A, or an A plus, or a B plus, and take these 10 steps to improve your security posture. Every step you take gets you further up that grading scale.
Mm-hmm.
That's stuff an executive understands.
It is. And I think that we focus too hard on these platforms in terms of just trying to show the technical skill sets and the capabilities of these platforms without, to Jeff's point, a 1-page document that says, here's the problem, here's where you stand, here's what your teams need to do to fix it, and here's how you improve your security posture in some way, shape, or form.
Or de-risk your environment.
Yeah.
Both of those, I think that's language that some executives prefer. Others like raise your security stance.
Yeah. A report like this, I'm sad to say, Jeff, if this was a report, if this was the best report that I could get out of a tool, this is still a report that I would have to rewrite into my own format.
But it depends on who the target audience is.
Yeah.
If this is your SOC manager as the target audience, or even director of incident response or whatever, right? This is a good report for them because they're going to actually care about what avenues were taken, and we're protected on most of our endpoints against this. A couple got through. That is a bigger issue. I want to dive into a little bit more. They're going to actually be able to take action on all of those different test results you see there.
Mm-hmm.
Anything above that person, this shouldn't be on that report.
Lost.
Right.
But I guess the TLDR, the bluff on that, the bottom line up front, right, is we still struggle as an industry to talk to executives.
Yeah, I don't see anything in this report that says why it matters.
What's in it for me? Unfortunately.
And maybe the executive level that they're targeting isn't CISO and above.
It's
and maybe that is fine.
And that, right? And very much that's a very good point. Maybe that is the best. They're only viewing it at that director manager level instead of the CISO. But I still think that gets back to what we said at the beginning, which is we struggle as an industry to teach people how to write reports at the CISO, the CIO, or the board level that show risk and show return on investment. And therefore we're remanded to not being able to speak at those about the things that are important to us.
Yeah, and I think this is where a good purple team report will be, hey, this is a higher risk, but the amount of work it will take for us to attack that one is more than solving all of the other ones, and we can improve our security stance more by doing all of the other ones first and then hitting the one that might actually have a little bit higher risk score or CVSS score, but would take a mind-numbing amount of cycles to turn that one around.
Yeah.
Right. And there's none of that. And I think that's really valuable information.
Agreed. That kind of wraps up the main portion of tonight. Talked about threat emulation, talked about bad pen test report. We tried to move the needle a little bit by talking about a better purple team report. But again, the industry is so new, the technology is so new. We still struggle as practitioners with getting those points across that, there's still a lot of work to be done, even on, some of the reports that are pulled out of the Attack IQ stuff. We'll continue to provide our feedback and our ideas on reporting, because that is something that Jeff and I are both incredibly passionate about. We're going to go ahead and start pushing a couple questions, Jeff, and let's see what we can do here. BJM Joss says, why do I get the feeling that the higher up the ladder you get, the more they let you draw with crayons and take naps?
They need the crayons to make it make sense, because they are so far, even if they had a technical past, they're so far from the keyboard in their role, and they need to understand what's the impact. I keep going back to this: concern, impact, solution, benefit. Like every time you ask me to talk about a report, it ties back to that, right? And if you cannot answer those things for your executive, you need to go back to the drawing board and rewrite your report.
100%. I did just remember, thank you for that mod in my ear. We do have a giveaway that we are going to run while we're answering questions. I did promise everybody a giveaway for tonight. We do have... we are giving away a case of Root. You've seen me drink these on stream very more. You've seen a lot of my posts on social media where I am touting this stuff. I do love this stuff. This is hands down my new favorite energy drink right here. Only 64 calories, nothing but all natural ingredients. But it definitely works on the pick me up. I was up a little late on last week's stream, Jeff. After I had these on stream last week, I was probably up to about 2:00 in the morning. They definitely, I definitely would recommend these as a coffee replacement. Much healthier option, and they definitely work as a pick me up. So, if we are going to give away a case of these, when we announce the winner, message Carmen Mod immediately with your name and your physical address. This is US only, and we'll get a case out to you ASAP. I know some people in chat have already picked up a couple cases using the promo code that we've given in chat. They can comment if they like it or not. I think Sec IT guy said that he enjoyed his that he got as well. There is, if you hit !root, a 20% discount code for you all on that one. So even if you don't get a case, you can smash that 20% discount and get that off. The draw with crayons thing is hard, right? It is real and it's hard. I know that's a little bit said tongue in cheek, BJM Joss. But it is, the struggle is real is probably the best way to put it, right? They
literally have 1,000 decisions per day that they know nothing about, and they have to make a snap decision. So the faster you can get them to assimilate the information to make an informed decision, the better it is for you.
100%.
And by the way, if you can do that effectively, they will prioritize the decisions that you come to them with next.
If you can speak to them how they like to be spoken to, 100%. If they recognize that you know how to do that conversation, they'll ask you back for more. 100%. I couldn't agree more with that. Straight Rogue 16 says, doesn't explaining why it's important to the org part of the reporting process?
Should be.
Depends on your audience, right? What you said earlier. Depends on who's going to read the report. You can't put 15 different perspectives in a report, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, why it's important to the org, the security engineer probably doesn't care that much.
The security engineer just wants to know, is it a bigger priority than what his boss told him last week?
Yep.
Wait, why does it sound like it's the red team's problem issue to do risk mitigations and things like that? Again, that thinking is why pen test reports aren't valuable. It is important for you to understand that if you pop a box that doesn't have business impact, doesn't have value to an organization, doesn't even allow you to do lateral movement because it's not on the domain, because it doesn't have domain creds, because you can't get anything out of LSAS, right? It is your responsibility to say, hey, yeah, I popped this box. You probably want to pull it off the network because it's not important, but it's not something you got to run out and do tomorrow. And that is your responsibility to understand that level of risk mitigation and things like that.
And here's the reality of it. I think a lot of the tools out there are starting to, nip away at what the red team had sole and exclusive responsibility and capability to do for an organization 4 or 5 years ago. Some of that is getting to be a more automated approach right now. And certainly with, like you walked through it earlier with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, point, click, drag, drop, execute. It makes it really easy for a very large portion of what the red team used to do. It just makes it automated and it takes it away from their responsibility. So they better find something else to do.
Yeah, 100%. Will this alleviate my issues if I remediate from a customer perspective? And again, that depends on how your perspective of your issues are. If you truly view your issues as patching vulnerabilities, and you're paying $20,000 or $30,000 for a pen test red team engagement to find your vulnerabilities, then you have paid for a really expensive vulnerability assessment, right? That's a really expensive vulnerability assessment. I would oftentimes tell people from a consulting perspective, don't pay me to pen test your org if you haven't already run a vulnerability scan and found things like 08067, 1710, right? Those really super easy to exploit vulnerabilities, because you're paying me for a super expensive vulnerability assessment. Does the report have an appendix out of interest? The one that I showed does not have an appendix. Reports that I've written do have appendices. And I do use appendices pretty heavily when I write reports on pen test and red team engagements. And I do that because I found that that's how board decks were written. That was an interesting discovery when I got around to writing board decks, where I found out that you write like a 10 PowerPoint page board deck, and then you've got like 100 pages in the appendix for all the stuff that you may never ever need in a conversation, but is there anyway. So I started doing that when I wrote reports. Found it to be actually a lot more effective. What reports do blue teams write up? Threat hunting reports, forensics reports, incident reports. Those are the ones that kind of come top of mind to me. What's the top sheet? That's like what Jeff was talking about. He's that one pager that's at the beginning. That's kind of like that TLDR, that bluff, that like what's in it for me type of thing. That's that top sheet. Jeff, I don't know if you want to elaborate on top sheet at all.
No, it should just start out with the scope of the project and key findings and key next steps.
Yeah. Would you list dollars in the executive report, i.e. a vulnerability that is in the wild that has been leveraged would show potential loss based on external data? That's a good question.
I think it could be used only in as much as like how it affected other companies. I think as soon as you start to extrapolate that to how this could affect them, you kind of lose the audience a bit.
I think we still struggle. Like, and this is, I think we go back to our insurance conversation, Jeff. I think insurance companies, even to this day, still struggle with likelihood and cost of impact of a security
100%.
incident. And so I think if they struggle, I think you're going to struggle as a pen tester. And I think what you may end up doing is throwing a whole lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt in a pen test report that may not necessarily be grounded in fact. You could,
but I think it's useful to include. This was the predominant attack used in the pipeline attack. This was the predominant attack used in the meat processing plant
Yeah.
attack. That kind of information I think is really helpful.
I think that's a fair point. I think, but that gets back to what you're saying before is comparative analysis of other companies in my verticals,
Yeah.
comparative analysis of, what this threat could mean to me if it were actually exploited. Stuns and Roses says, due to the nature of how companies deploy machines, wouldn't it be beneficial to test a vulnerability found on a box against other boxes? Could this point out an issue with the deployment process? I'd venture to imagine the vulnerability could be replicated across the domain. When you say vulnerability, though, I still go back to your vulnerability assessment process. If you're scanning, which you should be as part of your vulnerability assessment process, every machine in your environment, you'll identify that every Citrix environment that was deployed has the exact same vulnerability. Every desktop that every user had has the exact same Flash or Java vulnerability, right? Those statistical analyses should be prevalent in your vulnerability management process, because as you run that scan across your enterprise, you're seeing that same result. To your point, literally, absolutely everywhere. And so don't pay a pen test or a red team or breach assessment, capability to do what is the job of a vulnerability assessment team, that can do, which is something you should have in the first place. Com Bombadil. See, I'm getting used to saying it. What are good ways of validating the results from a vulnerability scan pen test that comes in like this? Manually. Breach and attack simulation, I think, is like, this is why I will, and I've harped on this. I've harped on this ever since I got introduced to breach and attack simulation last year. I think breach and attack simulation does a good job of combining vulnerability discovery to a degree, penetration testing and red teaming to a degree, into this purple teaming concept that allows your pen testing teams and your red teams to take their game to the next level. I've said it before. Go back and look at past streams. I've been an advocate for breach and attack simulation because I think that they allow us to elevate past the traditional problems that vulnerability assessment teams and legacy pen testing teams and legacy red teamings have had over the years, and allows us to do better at what it is you're talking about right there. Dark Elder won the case of root. Make sure you do message Carmen Mod right now with your real name and your physical address so that we can get that over and get your case sent out. You've got about 30 seconds to do that before we re-roll for somebody else. Just because I saw it pop up, is root really that delicious? I love it. I'm an advocate for it. Carmen is a health nut, incredibly health nut, and she loves the ingredients from a health perspective. There are folks in chat who have already bought their case. I know SecIT guy has done it. Ask them if they enjoy it. Don't let my testimonial be the only one, but I thoroughly enjoy it and I stand behind it. I wouldn't hawk it if I didn't stand behind it. Legit question. In the end, will InfoSec folks ever push for purple team operations? Will the board even see this as a positive ROI? I feel like some red teams or pen testers and blue teams do not want to team up and see the bigger picture. That statement is probably the most relevant part of that question. I think that last part is, we're self-eating our own ice cream cone because pen testers have too big of an ego, and I definitely hit on this last week. Pen testers have too big of an ego where they don't want to partner with blue teamers. And because of that, we don't see it being driven as a positive force for change in our own industry, which I think would help answer the first part of that. Jeff, I don't know if you want to piggyback on that one at all.
Yeah, it's the bigger picture that this is all about. That has to redefine the process. What is it there for? It's to help the company that's hiring you to do the pen test.
Yeah. Agreed. Is that you got more for me, Carmen, or is that it? I know we're a little over time. Lansy Kevin says, I'm fairly new to cybersecurity and may be thinking wrong on this, but are companies not testing themselves and working to find their vulnerabilities? Is this due to lack of knowledge or lack of skills in companies on cybersecurity? All of the above.
You might be new, but man, you're right on top of it.
Right on top of that one. Nothing escapes you. Welcome to the industry. No, companies struggle to understand what it means in terms of testing and finding their vulnerabilities. I have never, ever in my career seen a well implemented vulnerability assessment process. Ever. I have rarely, even rarely seen well orchestrated pen testing mechanisms inside companies, let alone outside companies.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's, I guess technically it's due to a lack of knowledge, but it's due to a lack of non-existent knowledge, because I don't think it's been created yet for people to not know about it.
Yeah.
I think I just used double negative there.
That's okay. I think we got it.
I understand what I said.
Do you think security companies will adapt to this new type of program? Would it be as profitable as the same recurring line item they are supplying now? I could care less whether it's profitable to a consulting company. I could care less. I think
it will be profitable to the consulting company.
It will be.
It's always profitable.
It will be.
They'll make it be.
They'll make it be.
It still has to go back to that purpose. What are they there for?
What are they there for? I think that internal companies, if they move to this type of model, will force consulting companies to acknowledge, right, that they need to have a business model to support this. In which case we'll see the industry change and adopt this type of programming. There's so much new. My personal fear, right, is we are still throwing so much new into the industry, and we're just now getting organizations used to pen testing. And then we throw terms like red teaming at them. Then we throw terms like purple teaming at them. Then we continue to try to hawk new stuff every single time they go to RSA, that we still suffer from tone deafness at the executive leadership level. And so that's why I think that we need to push it from the inside without trying to turn everything into a cost center and a profit model. Sergeant Shoddy, thanks for the 5 gifted subs. Appreciate you. In your experiences, have you seen companies actually do business impact analysis and or cyber impact analysis after during a pen test, or do they usually just blow it off? They usually just blow it off 100%. Regrettably. I think getting folks to actually do any form of threat impact analysis has always been a challenge. If Nitronic Deer is still in chat, I know Nitronic Deer does a lot in the GRC space. He would still... he would probably have a really good perspective on that as well. Stuns and Roses says, question, due to one of the last questions, I put up a poll on LinkedIn, and I wonder what your thoughts are on the topic. How can someone looking to enter this field gauge the level of their skill set for a role? Is it certifications, talking to mentors, or just assuming I'm a newbie no matter how many CTFs I complete or training I do before getting into my first role? I go back to this being an imposter syndrome question, right? I struggle with this one, Jeff, for a couple of reasons. We always want to measure ourselves against other people. And we want to say, if I'm not this high to ride this ride, I'm not good enough to be here. And when I see questions like this, I worry that what you're doing is you're setting that bar up there and saying, I'm not good enough in a skill set for a particular role because I haven't personally assessed myself to be that good. And I don't think that that's your job. Richard Branson, the guy who does Virgin Galactic?
Yep.
Yeah. He has a really good quote. He says, if somebody offers you a job and you're not sure if you can do it, take it and figure it out later.
Exactly. Hey, another one is we're all lifelong learners.
Right.
So even if you're not there right at the beginning, you'll get there because you got to learn. And there are times where you're in a role that is way bigger than you. Learn fast.
Learn fast.
And there are times that you're in a role that is below your skills. Figure out a way to learn to the next role because you're not going to find that role very intriguing for very long.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think so I guess to your question more so specifically, Stuns and Roses, if you're going to wait for some artificial bar that you've set for yourself, and you're going to wait until you reach that bar before you put yourself out there for your first role is going to pass you by, and you're going to be on the hamster wheel for a while.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit stronger on that. It is not your job to say no to yourself.
Oh, 100%. I like that. 100%. Josh Cyberlearner says, what have you seen in terms of the most successful purple team operation compared to one that was really good, and what was the main differences? I have not seen the most successful purple team operation, which is why I'm trying to bring awareness to it, because I've not
I think it's
seen
still iterating.
It's 100% still iterating. I wholeheartedly agree. I think if we can just get the organizations to start pushing that we need one, and we need to start moving teams, even if that definition of purple teaming was just creating more synergy between red and blue on a day-to-day basis, I think that would be the definition of good in my mind. When testing, when do you go for assumed breach and test with a box specifically set up as compromised versus trying to get in from the outside? I like this. I think that this goes back to your threat model, right? I think that this goes back to, what are you, I would see a threat model that focuses on phishing, right? Maybe you assume that the phishing was successful, and you do a box specifically set up as compromised internally to finish out the rest of the TTPs from that MITRE attack. I think that that's a fantastic way to look at that red team assessment in that light. Josh Cyberlearner again says, when it comes to purple certifications, what are the most important aspects to look for when it comes to finding great certifications for purple teaming? And will INE and other companies start to create more purple teaming content? I think the last answer to that question is yes, 100%. You'll start to see more purple teaming content. I think I would still use Attack IQ's. I would still use Attack IQ's purple team training as the cornerstone example of the most excellent purple teaming training that I've seen out there in the market space. And so I'd say use that when gauging the rest of the market space, because it's so few, so limited that's out there. But I do think that as we see more and more people adopt those concepts, you will see more and more training in that regard. BSEC says, so Neil, do you think blue teams should just go away and just call it purple team, seeing as how the blue teams are now actively threat hunting and pen testing their networks? I like that concept. I'd be the first one in line to embrace that concept. 100%. Do you think it's possible to be a good tier 2, tier 3 blue teamer without any red team experience? Absolutely, 100%. Without a doubt. That's an easy one. My project is now considering to add vulnerability assessments in addition to our SOC operations. Would you consider that as a purple teaming? I could buy off on that. I think if done with a good process, I think you could probably pull that off. It'd be a step in the right direction. Last question for the night, Jeff, and then we're going to wrap it up. I know we're over time. I appreciate you and everybody else staying over. Do companies contracting for a pen test tell those pen testers what vulnerabilities they already know about, what vulnerabilities they've accepted? Jeff, you brought this up last week. You want to hit on that point again?
Yeah, I actually think you'll get a lot of bang for the buck if you say, yeah, we already know about that. We've accepted it, so it is not a big deal. I think that information going up to the executives will stop you from spinning your wheels on irrelevant projects and getting rabbit trailed off of better priorities. And I think if good pen testers know what the vulnerabilities are, they can use their time and talents to actually find things that might be more relevant to the company.
On top of that, most, I shouldn't say most, I'd say maybe 50% of CISOs and SOC directors and SOC managers and GRC managers and directors who hire pen testers, there's oftentimes some conversation in that scoping call that says, we know that these areas are bad. And there's almost that conversation that says, we'd really like for you to highlight those areas, but we'd also really like for you not to focus on these areas. To your point, Lisa, we've accepted that risk over here, but we can't get the organization to focus on this risk over here. And so we'd really like for you to highlight the risk over here for the organization.
Yeah, or educate us on the impact of different risk. Like, tell us something we don't already know.
Yeah.
That's really where I'm going with this.
100%. Jeff, thank you so much, buddy, as always.
Thank you. And by the way, thanks for taking my one quick question last week of, hey, what should a good report look like, and spawning that into an entire conversation.
It's
I thought
okay.
this is good.
Did you learn anything?
I did. This is really good.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you, and I'm put you on the spot. I didn't prep you for this. Give me 3 takeaways from tonight's episode.
3 takeaways: prioritize the things that you want a red team to actually look at. The purple team needs to have the business impact. I know we talked about that last week. I think that's a super good thing to reemphasize, but that needs to be in a very short, concise executive report summary page that shows this is what we tested. Here was the scope. Here was the impact. Here's our asks, our next 3 steps. And then probably the last thing, in no particular order, is use your internal team to take care of the low-hanging fruit, like what we talked about with MITRE. Use the tools that you can use to take care of some of those vulnerabilities, and leverage the super smart people to do the super hard tasks and offload the easy ones.
Yeah. For up-to-the-minute cybersecurity news, make sure you follow and subscribe to the Cyber and Security channel on Twitch and YouTube. Also, make sure you turn on those notifications so that you know when we go live.